So the title of my lesson today is Surrender to Surprise. And the backstory is for the last about 26 minutes, because we're at 10:28 right now, about the last 26 minutes as you're sitting here, we are frantically trying to figure out why the live stream's not working. Surrender to surprise. Rehearsal, I share with Shayna as she tells me about the meaning of this song to her and the memories that brings up. I said, feel free to share that. Dedicate it to your mother while she's watching online. So I'm sitting here with my phone, so I have from start to finish, you singing Que Sera, Sera, and what you shared about your mom. Of course, she's got you from this angle. I didn't want to stand right in front of you. So I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what a setup, right? Surrender to surprise. Oh, well, I wish I could tell you that I handled it perfectly. I wish I could tell you that I didn't have any frustrating thoughts going through my mind, but I did. But I also, at the same time, of feeling that frustration, and oh gosh, more than half of our community now watches us online, is also that part that says, not only Que Sera, Sera, but all is as it should be in this moment. And there is the opportunity, no matter what life hands us, no matter what kind of surprise or interruption, ultimately we still have the choice to handle it however we choose to handle it, to be able to be present with it, to acknowledge what we might be feeling in the moment, but then to also be able to let it go and to move forward and deal with whatever is next. So surrender to surprise. The way I thought I was going to be beginning this service was to ask you just to kind of think about when you were a kid and maybe Christmas time, and perhaps this is also true if you're Jewish and you celebrated Hanukkah, when there are the presents. And, as a kid, many children have this desire. I just want to kind of peek underneath that wrapping paper just a little bit so I don't get caught, so mom and dad don't know that I was trying to figure out what's underneath that wrapping paper. Or we shake the box quietly trying to figure out what's in it because we know there's a surprise and we anticipate that it's going to be a happy surprise, a pleasant surprise, and we just want to experience it. We want to know what it is. What's true for us, especially as we grow up, is that we realize that life surprises are varied, right? It's not just about that beautiful wrapped present underneath the tree or in the birthday wrapping paper. It's the variety of experiences that we have in life. Some that we greet with joy and excitement, and others that kind of are just gut-wrenching or challenging, and we don't initially know what to do about it. Christina Baldwin, in this chapter, in this practice of surrender to surprise, says sometimes life surprises are delightful, sometimes they're painful. They introduce unexpected elements and experiences we might not have the courage to choose for ourselves. That line, I think, is a powerful line. They introduce unexpected elements and experiences we might not have the courage to choose for ourselves. I think there are times in our lives that we are surprised by an event or an activity or a situation in such a way that surprise is meant to wake us up to an idea or a possibility or an opportunity that, much like Christina Baldwin is saying here, we might not have had the courage to choose for ourselves. My very standing before you as a minister is evidence in my own life of exactly what she's writing about here, about the idea of being introduced to unexpected elements and experiences that we might not have the courage to choose for ourselves. My whole journey into ministry was something that I did not have the courage to very consciously pursue on my own. My journey into ministry was the last thing I ever thought I would experience. My experience in unity was the same as many of you sitting in this room or those of you who usually tune in online. And that is, I had found a teaching, or I was introduced to a teaching that made sense to me, and in that teaching and in the community I felt accepted. In the teaching, I was hearing things that were helpful to me in where I was in my life and what it was I was dealing with. And it happened to be a broken heart at a very, very young age. But the surprise element came from me sitting in the congregation one Sunday and having a flash that I would be standing up on the stage doing what I do now and have for a long time. That was a surprise that was not a happy surprise for me. Not a happy surprise at all. It scared the living daylights out of me. I could not relate to it at all. They introduce unexpected elements and experiences we might not have the courage to choose for ourselves. And I was pretty strong then as I am now, and so I did the really wise thing. I pushed it down as far as I could push it, figuring if I pushed it down really far, it would go away. Have you ever done that? Push it down. And whenever I think of that, or I feel myself even naturally doing this movement, I think of pushing down a beach ball in a swimming pool or in the ocean. And the effort it takes to push it down and what? Keep it down. And what happens as soon as you let go of it? It doesn't just kind of gradually come to the surface. It bounces up with quite a bit of strength, right? Equal probably, I don't understand physics all that well, but I would imagine equal to the force with which we were keeping it down. It's going to repel in the opposite direction. Surrender to surprise. Because I couldn't grasp the element, because I was too afraid to explore the possibility. I was all of 18 years old. Too afraid to explore the possibility of that surprise. I pushed it down, and it surfaced for a period of about 3 or 4 months, I believe, in nightmares that would wake me up in the middle of the night. I really did not want to do this. Did not want to do this. It was a surprise, and it was a surprise probably to everybody in my life. Surprise to my parents, surprise to John when I was dating him for the first time. You want to do what? You're going to go away and be a minister? They didn't say it, but I think the subscript was, you've got to be crazy. You've got to be crazy. Got to be crazy. I went one day when those crazy nightmares were happening to my grandmother's house, the very one that had introduced me to unity the very first time. And I went with the intention of sharing with her this surprise nightmare, because I knew she's a brilliant woman, very loving, very smart, very open, very progressive. And I knew she would say, there, honey. We can make the nightmare go away. You don't need to do this. You're right. And instead, another surprise. As I sat there trying to get ready to tell her what was happening, she said, don't say another word. Some of you know some of this story. She said, don't say another word. She went into her bedroom, came out of her bedroom with a note. And she handed me the note. I think it was in an envelope. I don't remember for sure. But she handed me the note, and on the note, she had written her premonition. And her premonition was, Wendy's going to go to Unity and become a minister. Do you think that was a surprise? That was a big, big, big surprise. And it is in perfect alignment, I think, with what Christina is writing here. Sometimes surprises are delightful, sometimes painful, I think sometimes very confusing, at least initially on the surface perhaps. But she says they introduce unexpected elements and experiences we might not have the courage to choose for ourselves. She goes on to write, surprise encourages us to relate to experience with a sense of wonder. Surprise challenges us to be startled awake, I can echo that, and sometimes shocked to our core. When we set intention and claim purpose, we often step forward with great certainty. But a gap always opens between what we think will happen and what actually happens. A gap opens between what we think will happen and what actually happens. Nod your head if you've ever had that experience. Sure you have. This gap is surprise. We may be maintaining peace of mind, moving at the pace of guidance, and practicing certainty of purpose. You'll recognize those are the first three whispers. We may be maintaining peace of mind, moving at the pace of guidance, and practicing certainty of purpose, but that does not mean we know how we're going to reach a goal or who and what is coming along to help or hinder us in the journey. In the journey, surrender to surprise. Say that with me. Surrender to surprise. There's two elements to that, right? The element of surprise that we're exploring now and the element of surrender that we'll explore a little bit in a minute here as well. Surrender to surprise. If you're reading along in her book, you will recall that she writes of a story of a personal experience she did. She was about 47 years old at the time, and she was looking back at her high school graduation pictures. And she decided to write a note to her high school self. And so she wrote this note to her high school self, and in the end of the note, she said to her high school self, as a 47-year-old woman, it ends with the words to that girl, "I just wanted to say that things are going to be okay, but they won't turn out as you expect." I don't know how many of you here had or still have a high school yearbook, but if you do, it could be fun to pull it out and just see the kinds of things you might have written about yourself and about your hopes and dreams at that point in your life. And to kind of reflect, I think that exercise that she did with herself is a worthwhile one. To, as you think about who you are today and where you are today, to reflect back to that person all those years ago and kind of share with that person the encouragement that could have been beneficial to her or him at that time. The knowingness that things may not turn out the way you thought they were going to, but heck, you're here. You're here. It is all right. It may not be perfect. It may not be exactly the way that you even want it right now, but you have everything within you that you need to work toward what is important to you and to work through whatever seems to be standing in your way. And the ability and the practice, I think, of surrendering to surprise is a piece of what makes that a little bit easier. She writes that surprise is a practice. It's a practice of these three things she suggests. The practice of accepting the unexpected. The practice of accepting the unexpected. How many of you have a little bit of room for growth with that one? I know I do. I know I do. Practice accepting the unexpected. Second, she says, it's the practice of leaving enough space in the day for something to happen that isn't on the list. Anybody have room for improvement there? I know I do. I absolutely do. In fact, maybe I need to put on my to-do list, which seems to be never ending, leave room in this day for something that's not on this list, or just block it off on my calendar. I think it is as much an action as it is a way of being, that it's a way of making sure that no matter what we think we need to be doing, that we are always present enough and mindful enough to allow for something else to come forward and to come through. And that something else to come forward and to come through, I'm suggesting, is that spiritual impulse, that divine idea, that divine thought that, oh, maybe I really do need to call that person today because maybe they really need to hear from me. Maybe I really do need to take that one step toward my goal today. Or maybe I really do need to deepen into my meditation practice today, to follow through with that divine impulse, to leave enough flexibility in the way one approaches one's time, one's life, that there is always room to respond to that divine opportunity, to respond to that divine impulse. And the third, she says, is a practice of balancing structure and openness. I like that, the idea of balancing structure and openness. So it's not an either or, it's really a both and way of being, to balance structure with openness. There will always be surprise. Have you noticed that? No matter what we think we're going to do in a day or in a lifetime, there's going to be an element of surprise. And I think that to the extent that we can embrace that and not be totally shocked by it or thrown by it, to that extent we will be able to experience our life and one another with greater joy, with greater lightness, with greater hope. I like the way she says it here. But when we are moving so fast in a fantasy of control, even a traffic delay can be interpreted as a personal affront rather than a neutral act. A little more willingness to surrender to surprise might go a long way toward reducing the rage and anxiety that seem to be escalating in society. Becoming aware of how surprise supports us is a spiritual skill. Stop there for just a moment and take that in. Becoming aware of how surprise supports us is a spiritual skill. It's a different way of looking at it. It's a different way of interacting with it. To live life consciously, we need to prepare for wonderful and horrible things to happen to us that we don't expect. Every day, we need to notice when and how Spirit is trying to get through our little fantasies of self-determination with some other message. In my own life, what I got to learn from those experiences of those first premonitions and those nightmares is if God, life, Spirit, the universe really has something for me to do and be about, I'm not going to be able to avoid it. Somehow, some way, it is always going to make itself known to me. Does that make sense? It's always when there is something that you are here to do. Remember we talked last week about certainty of purpose. When there is something you're here to do, a way for you to be, a group of people you're to interact with, a difference you're to make in the world, to the extent that you ignore that, you're going to keep having something knocking at the door of your consciousness, your heart, your soul, this nagging feeling that something is not quite right, that something is missing. But as soon as you yield to what that is, as soon as you yield to what that calling is, what that purpose is, you're going to have a sense of fulfillment. You're going to have a sense of completion, not that the thing itself is complete, but that your sense of identity, your soul's purpose is complete because now you know what you're here to do and be about. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? There are teachers that speak, I do too actually, that speak of the idea of divine discontent, of paying attention to that divine discontent, because in that divine discontent is usually a message that you are somehow not paying attention to what it is that your soul is really here to understand and be about. Discontent, to me, in a way, is like the pain of the soul. The body, when we feel pain in the body, what is the pain trying to do? What is it trying to do? Tell us something. It's trying to get our attention so that we will respond and take action to alleviate the pain, to heal whatever is causing the pain, right? So even though it doesn't feel good, it's a good thing. Its purpose, its ultimate purpose is good. It's to wake us up, to let us know something's not right in the body and it needs our attention. in many ways, I think that discontent is like that on a soul level. That discontent is a message to us that something about us and what we are here to experience or be or share is a little out of whack. And it won't go away. This is my belief. You may feel very differently. It won't go away if we don't honor it and try to understand the gift in it. To me, that is the element of surrendering to surprise, surrendering to that discontent, not surrender in such a sense of giving up. You know, we in the West, I think, have a challenge with the word surrender because I think we associate with it the idea of losing, the idea of giving up. It took me quite a number of years in spiritual practice and study and exploration and testing things out to really come to understand the power of surrender, to understand that it is not about giving up, it's not about losing, it's about yielding into something greater. It's a very different way of being in life, and I would say a much better way of being in life. Surrendering to surprise is the willingness to yield into the unexpected and to trust that in the unexpected there is something good that's trying to come through. One of our core beliefs in unity is the omnipresence of God, by whatever name you call God. It's our first principle, that God is everywhere equally present as the force or energy of absolute good. Doesn't mean that bad things don't happen, bad things do happen, but there is fundamentally an energy of force of absolute good available to and through each and every one of us. When we really get that, then it becomes easier to surrender to surprise, to yield to that unexpected, to be willing to explore that discontent, because we trust that within it is not only a wake-up call, but we trust that within it is a gift for us. It may be a change in a lifestyle, it may be a change in relationship, it may be exploring a totally new career or path in your life, but it's trying to help move you along to something new and something that perhaps you would not have had the courage to pursue or explore on your own. You know, most of us don't have a problem with happy surprises, right? Obviously, by now you get that. I'm not talking about the surprises like the beautifully wrapped presents under the Christmas tree. I'm talking about, you know, when you get the call in the middle of the night, or when you get a registered letter from an attorney, or when you get papers that you're being sued. Those are the kinds of surprises. When you're having a nightmare about what is yours to do, and there's a part of you that just can't relate to what the message of that nightmare is. Those are the kinds of surprises that give us the opportunity to stretch and grow. Here's what she writes about that. Here's the thing about gut-wrenching, heart-shaking, mind-changing surprise. It is a donation to our own growth. Yeah, I know. Some of this is a donation to our own growth. If we work it well, from this growth, we can donate insight and action back into the well-being of the larger community. And then she goes on to give examples, you know, of perhaps a mother struggling to make peace with the death of her child, and then launches a nonprofit organization to help those that have experienced some of the same, or a family member who inherits a lot of wealth and decides to share that wealth to a nonprofit whose purpose is environmental protection. She gives a variety of different examples there. But that if we work it well, this growth, we can donate insight and action back into the well-being of the community. I stand before you thinking about kind of a bit of a personal philosophy I have had for many years now, and that is that anytime I'm experiencing something really difficult in my life, personally or in the church, or I guess that's about it for me, personally, or in the church, that I am so determined to learn everything I can from that experience, to eke out every learning. Jan, I'm thinking about you in the talk that you gave when we opened your exhibit and how you punctuated that talk with, and what I learned, and what I learned. I am so committed to eking out everything that I can learn in that experience with the intention of pulling out something that could be helpful to others, whether it is to my husband or to my children or to my neighbors or to my friend or to my hairdresser or to you in a Sunday service. Because then for me, what that means is that really awful thing, and I don't tell you what the difficult things are. I'm not here to use you as a therapy session. So you don't know what it is that I'm referring to, other than saying, just like you, I have stuff that happens personally and professionally. But what I know is that when we are willing to share it with each other, the things that we have learned, it is a donation to the well-being of the larger community. It is a way to be of service to help another. Aren't you glad that you don't have to make every single mistake that it's possible to make? I mean, think about that for a moment. Have you ever learned something, a life lesson, from somebody else? Raise your hand. Okay, I think every single one of us raising our hands, maybe both hands. We've learned from somebody else's life experience. They had the courage, the vulnerability to share with us what happened to them, how they dealt with it, what they learned from it, and we made mental notes and we learned from that, right? Right? It's a blessing to be able to learn from another's mistakes so that we don't have to make every single mistake ourselves. I'm very grateful for that. But I also think there's a reciprocity that comes into play there, and that is our opportunity, our willingness to share the kinds of things that we have learned, and not like not like a sermon, but to share the kinds of things that we have learned with one another to help lighten the load. So surrendering to surprise is built, to me, as I wrap this up, on a couple of things. It's built, the surprise piece to me is built on our first principle in unity, that there is one presence and one power in the universe, God the good, omnipotent, that there is a force for good, a seed of good, an energy of good in everyone and in everything trying to come through. That's why we can look at those surprises that are the gut-wrenching surprises, or those surprises that at first we want to push down. We can look at them with fresh eyes and say, okay, I may not see it right now. This surprise may really be in disguise, but I can trust that in this surprise, God is in it too. And that means good is in it too. And the surrender is the yielding to that, the knowing that things may not unfold. They probably, more often than not, will not unfold exactly the way we think that they should or the way that we had planned. But we can pay attention to and move with the pace of the unfolding and the direction that the unfolding is taking. So I hope that in both her chapter and in some of the things I've shared with you today, that you walk away with something that helps you to look at the element of surprise in your own life with new and fresh eyes, that gives you a sense of courage to be with whatever is trying to emerge that may be bigger than you ever thought was possible for yourself. Namaste.